The final days of Queen Victoria and the announcement of her death. The Queen's family, court and the people struggled to contemplate a country without Queen Victoria as the head of the monarchy. She had ruled over Britain for 64 years, and it was all many people knew of. Her passing occurred on the 22nd of January 1901. She was 81 years old, and she had dedicated 64 years of her life to her country. Her death would mark the end of the Victorian era in 1901, after a horrible year previously in 1900. After 81 years of life, even her own children were becoming ill or dying, and 1900 was a particularly devastating year. Her daughter Vicky, the Empress of Germany, had been given a terminal diagnosis of breast cancer that had spread throughout her body, and Queen Victoria was aware of her suffering in the castle of Kronborg. More devastating news arrived by telegram that her favourite son Alfred, the Duke of Edinburgh, had died of throat cancer after chain-smoking and drinking heavily most of his life. She wrote, "Oh, God, my poor darling Alfie gone too, my third grown-up child. It is hard at 81. The bad news is far from over, and weeks later her grandson, Prince Christian Victor, eldest son of her daughter, Princess Helena, had succumbed to enteric fever while serving with the British Army in South Africa. Then, on Christmas Day, her longest friend was found dead in her bed while staying with the Queen on the Isle of Wight at Osborne House. All of this tragedy took its toll on the Queen, and she was not her usual self. Her love for food had wavered, and she had lost half of her body weight. Her age was also beginning to show, and she relied on a wheelchair. She was almost blind, with moments of memory loss and confusion. Despite all of this, she was perceived to be invincible. Her children were in denial, her government was unprepared, and the public knew nothing at all. Only 22 days into the new year, shortly after 6:30, the police were called to surround Osborne House, where she was living. All communications were suspended, and Superintendent Fraser walked down the long gravel driveway to the gate surrounded by large crowds to announce her death on a small bulletin board. Her Majesty the Queen breathed her last breath at 6:30, surrounded by her children and grandchildren. Her death stunned the world. Her staff rallied round in a state of confusion. She had reigned so long that there was no one still alive that knew of the protocol for a monarch's funeral. Sir James Reed was the Queen's personal physician for more than 20 years. He had tried to warn the royal family of her rapid decline and that she had little time left, but it fell on deaf ears. Even when it was evident that she was drifting between delirium and lucidity, the family would not believe it. Perhaps the reason the family were in such denial was because the Queen herself did not believe in her mortality. The daughters, Princess Helena and Princess Beatrice, tried to maintain business as usual, ignoring completely that their mother may die. Meanwhile, the Prince of Wales refused to cancel his weekend activities. The Duke of Connaught refused to cancel his plans to travel to Berlin to celebrate 200 years of the Prussian monarchy. And Sir James Reed, the personal physician, telegraphed the Queen's grandson, Kaiser Wilhelm of Germany, in a desperate plea to bring the family together for her final moments. And 5 days before the Queen's death on the 17th of January, her health took a dramatic turn for the worst, and she suffered multiple strokes. The family were forced to cancel their plans and notify the public of their mother's wavering health. The news spread like wildfire through the news with headlines such as "Queen unconscious, sinking fast," and "Queen rallying, has eaten and slept." The family was summoned to Osborne House on the Isle of Wight, and the government seemed to continue their duties. The family filled the small bedroom alongside the Bishop of Winchester and the rector of St. Mildred's Church. They sung hymns while the family comforted their dying mother. The room filled with the sobs of her children, and each son, daughter and grandchild was summoned by name to kiss the Queen's hand and say their goodbyes. Once the Queen had slipped away, Osborne House was closed off to the public. The staff were forbidden from leaving until the new King Edward had finished with formalities. Shortly after, a notice was hung out of the front of Osborne House to large crowds of people and press, and members of the crowd ran through the streets crying and shouting at the top of their lungs that the Queen is dead. The press rushed to report on the story and announce her death to the world, and within an hour the London Evening News had a special edition paper out. The great tom bell of St. Paul's rung across London as people poured out of theatres into the streets to mourn the death of their Queen and sing God Save the Queen. Shops and people began to dress in black to show their respects. However, this was not the get-up the Queen had envisioned for herself. The royal household was in a state of panic. No one was aware of the proper protocol of burying a monarch. The government were panicking that the funeral that the Queen had requested was a far cry from the private candlelit affairs of other royals. She had demanded a full military state funeral, no embalming, no lying in state, no mourning black. She wanted a white funeral, purple and white, with white ponies and gun carriage, and the first burial of a monarch outside of the confines of Westminster Abbey and St. George's Chapel since George I. Please comment, like and subscribe if you wish for more stories, and leave your suggestions below and I will endeavour to cover them.